Good early morning and welcome back to Teal House. We are going to can something I have never canned before, and this is going to be fun. This is a USDA approved recipe. I'm excited to try this one. I've always passed this one over because I saw it and I was like, what on earth would I use those for? And now that groceries are kind of expensive, or the price keeps going up, and we're eating a lot more meatless meals, I felt I had some ideas on what I would use these for. So we are going to can beans in tomato sauce. We're going to make our own fresh tomato sauce. I have tons of tomatoes in the freezer, but if you don't want to make your own tomato sauce, you can just use canned tomato sauce. It's actually not going to use very much for this recipe. And I have 2 pounds of black beans. You can use any kind of similarly sized dry beans. Like I wouldn't use butter beans or lentils, right? But red beans, pinto beans, black beans. Typically people would probably use pinto beans for this recipe, but I don't really care. Black beans is what I have on hand. So what do I plan to do with beans in tomato sauce? Well, first they make a good base for a variety of types of baked beans. You kind of have it started, and then when you open up the jar, you can jazz up your baked beans however you like it. But the biggest way I'll use these are soup starters. So the beans in the tomato sauce is a great base for a stew. And it's a great one where you open up in your fridge and you're like, what on earth am I going to do with 2 stalks of celery, a carrot and half of an onion? Well, we're going to use our beans and tomato sauce as a stew base, add the vegetables that are hanging out in the fridge. Maybe you got like a half roll of sausage you haven't cooked up yet, or some chicken, you could throw it in there too. So it's kind of like a soup-based starter, but with the beans in it, you already have a lot of filling fiber and ingredient. You already have a really good filler in there with lots of fiber for your diet. So the other things that you're throwing in are just to kind of jazz it up and make it more interesting. You're not really needing to add a lot of meat for like protein or a lot of other things to fill the belly, because the beans are already going to do a good job. This recipe is pretty simple. We're following the USDA recommended guidelines for canning, so you will need to pressure can these. I'm going to make the tomato sauce out of tomatoes that I have frozen in my freezer. So if you're not making your own tomato sauce, you can fast forward further in this video and get right on to the bean part.
The title of this recipe is actually misleading, and I feel like I should clarify that. It is called Beans Packed in Tomato Sauce on the National Center for Home Food Preservation website. But we're actually making tomato sauce to drain off the juice to pack the beans in juice. I don't know why they title it that way. It's kind of silly. When you look at the linked recipe, you'll notice they also have options to pack beans in molasses and a ketchup type sauce that you make. So you could try either one of those as well. I stored my tomatoes in the freezer during the summer, and now we're pulled out 2 bags. We're going to use these to make juice/sauce. Once they're slightly defrosted, it's really easy to pull off the skin so we don't have to boil them. I cut off any stems that are left. I've already cut off bad parts and kind of washed them before I froze them, but I didn't core them, so that's what we're doing here real quick. I'm not using any special variety. This is just a mix of whatever I grew in the garden. We bring it to a little simmer. I drain off the extra liquid. That's what we're going to use for our tomato juice. And I'm going to put them back on the stove and simmer them some more and drain some more. I need a quart of liquid for this recipe, and I had no problem getting that. What it left me with was crushed tomatoes that were ready to be made into a nice thick sauce. I'm using 2 12-ounce bags of black beans today. We're going to put them in a strainer. We're going to rinse them off, pick out any like gristle or anything that might be hiding in there. And then we're going to put them in a large pot. For every cup of bean, you're going to want to cover with 3 cups of water. So if you're making a really big batch, make sure you put it in a huge stock pot, because these dried beans expand a lot. We're going to fill up our stock pot, put it on the stove, bring the beans to a boil, and boil for 2 minutes. Turn the heat off on the stove. We're just going to let them sit in the hot water for an hour. While they're sitting in that hot water, we're going to go ahead and make our tomato sauce. It's going to be nice and thick since we drained off all that liquid. The nice thing with making a little bit of tomato sauce like this is I'm not going to can it, so I don't need to follow any certain rules or recipes. I can just make the sauce how I want to. I'm going to hit it with the immersion blender, get it nice and smooth, and then we're going to add some sugar. I add some oregano, some parsley, some garlic, just kind of normal spaghetti sauce spices. Now, if you do want to make a larger batch, make sure you make enough for at least 4 pints, because when you're pressure canning or water bath canning, the recipes are designed for at least 4 jars in the pot. This has to do with how heat transfers, and also the likelihood that if you don't have enough jars in the pot, one of them might tip over. and then that can ruin the seal on your jar. So you want to have at least 4 jars in the pot. Some people like to add water jars, so fill up a pint jar with water and throw it in there while you're canning. You could do that as well. But if I have something that's not going to be enough for 4 pint jars, I just go ahead and keep it in the fridge. With a large family, we're going to use this amount of spaghetti sauce in one meal, no problem. We're going to take what's in this pot, we're going to drain it into a 1/2 gallon mason jar. Of course, taste test first. Made a little mini pizza for lunch. And then we're going to stick that in the fridge until we need it. And we're going to bring this pot back to the stove because we have to make the sauce/juice that's going to go on our beans. I didn't even bother washing the pot because we're just adding tomato stuff right back in to make this base. So we're going to add a quart of tomato juice, 3 tablespoons of sugar, 2 teaspoons of salt, and then 1/4 teaspoon each of mace, allspice, and ground cloves, little dash of pepper, and then 1 tablespoon of minced onion. Now here is where I made a mistake. I feel like the recipe online wasn't real clear. This amount of liquid is enough per about 3 pint jars of beans. I should have tripled this recipe, and so I didn't have quite enough. We're going to go ahead and drain the black beans that have been sitting in hot water for an hour. We're going to cover them up with another 12 cups of clean water and return them to a boil. Once we've returned them to a boil, we drain them again, and then we go ahead and pack them. Don't skip these draining steps. I could go into it all day, but it's important for the digestibility and safety of home canned beans. We want to fill each of these jars 3/4 of the way full with our now mostly reconstituted dry beans. So we don't want to get the liquid, that's why we drain them. We just want the beans in here, but 3/4 of the way full. And once we've done that, then we can top the jars off with the liquid that we made. Now, as I said, I was short on the sauce. And so what I did with the remaining jars is I filled them with water on top of the beans. So these are just like regular canned beans you'd get at the store. The canning time is longer for beans canned in water, so I did process the whole batch for 75 minutes. But if you were just doing the beans in the tomato juice, your processing time is 65 minutes at 11 pounds pressure. Do check your altitude chart if you live somewhere high up because that may alter your times or pressures. After you add your liquid, you want to debubble your jars, wipe your rims, add your lids and rings to fingertip tightness, and then go ahead and place in your pressure canner. As always, you don't start your time until you've reached pressure, and once you have reached time, turn the canner off and don't touch it until it goes back to 0 on its own. We are all done. So the rule is that you sit them on your counter for 24 hours, then you can remove the rings, the bands, and then you store them. Make sure to label. Storing without the rings on reduces the very small possibility of either a false seal or the ring rusting onto your jar, especially if you live somewhere that's really humid. There's really no reason to leave the ring on other than people don't want to store rings. Please just take them off. You get no benefit for taking the risks. One thing I did learn from doing this recipe, I felt like usually the National Center for Home Food Preservation recipes are very, very clear and almost like too precise and pedantic. But this one, it wasn't real clear about how much of the tomato juice sauce filling I was going to need. And now I know that the recipe on the website, it's one of those recipes for every 12-ounce bag of beans is basically how it worked out. So I should have almost tripled the recipe, definitely doubled it. So I ended up a little short. So some of these are just canned in water. I had to go with the longer canning time. Beans in water is 75 minutes for pints instead of 65. So we did can everything at the 75. And it was a little hard to tell. They look very similar, but when you look closely, you can see the ones that have the sauce in them because they also have the little pieces of onion in them. But other than that, it went great. I'm really excited to try these, and if it's something we really enjoy, we'll definitely be canning many more next time. Anyway, thanks so much for watching, and we will see you all again really soon.